Hello, everyone. My name is Alina Bonadonna, and I'm super warmly welcome everyone to join our first Eastern edition of Academy. And today we have absolutely amazing speaker, like always. But today is my extreme pleasure to welcome Sterling here. How are you, Sterling?
Very well. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your invite.
Likewise, guys, how do I understand that our academy is not just a platform, it's already community, is when I see our speakers coming again and again and with a more and more valuable topic like always. And before we start, just my usual question to everyone to show that you hear us well, see us well, so we can start our presentation. You see already, people know what to do. They put hearts, claps. Please show more. Yes, 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 yes. Great, great. So, as always, my huge thanks to Nemes Technologies for supporting such young but very powerful academy project. And on this last word, I just give time and space to Sterling to present this beautiful, amazing topic. Are you ready, Sterling?
I certainly am. Thank you, Eleanor.
Perfect. So now you can introduce yourself while I am switching on your slides.
Thank you very much.
And let me know if you see everything.
I can. I hope everyone else can.
Yes. Okay. Now it should be fine.
So, guys, I'm a little bit worried today. I've done some work with Nimbus in the past, a great organisation, but I have heard it said that they normally ask you to present twice in your career, once on the way up and once on the way down. And so I'd like to say thank you, Eleanor, for inviting me again. So I'm not quite sure what that means. Before I talked on food fraud, and today I'm going to talk about food allergens, but in a different type of way. So my name is Sterling Crew. I've been in the food industry for some 45 years. And what I'm trying to share with you is what have I observed about food allergens in that long period of time? How's it evolved? And what have I learned? And perhaps share some of the learnings with you. Um, my background, I started off in environmental health, so I ran a regulatory food department in London. Then I went into Marks and Spencer, one of the UK's top leading retailers. I also worked at Tesco, and I've also worked for two manufacturers, and I do some consulting work. So my experience is based over 45 years, looking at the different sectors, the global food supply chain, and also a lot of time in retailing where you see these type of issues coming. So I'm going to talk about the impact of culture and behavioral science on food allergen management. So basically, I'm going to say to you that I think food safety allergen management is all in the mind. So I'll share some early thoughts with you and some work I'm doing about what tools can we use with behavioral science to strengthen our food safety management systems. So could I have the next slide, please, Eleanor? Please feel free to ask questions at the end. I think we'll have about 40 minutes. So I'll do my very best to answer as many questions as I can. And if I can't, then I'll certainly get to someone that can and try to answer your questions on the site. So I hope you had a great Easter. And actually, today is the first start of Allergy Awareness Week, and I'm particularly focusing on food allergy awareness. I'm sure you've seen allergy awareness. It's all over the newspapers, it's on TV, and it's a group of organisations who are trying to make the public realise what food allergies are and allergies in general, and try to educate people and empower people. What it's not is about the science. So no one's sitting there and saying, this is what the science says about how you manage allergens, or sitting there and say, this is what the regulations say. So straight away, their whole approach is influences the culture of the organizations, to influence the country, to influence those who have allergens, food allergens, and those who are responsible for feeding those who have food allergens. Next slide, please. So a very pertinent time to have our talk. the first day of this week. Next slide, please, Anna. So if I just talk about food allergen management, can I go back to that slide? Yeah, that one. Just in general, when I was a kid, I never met anybody who had a food allergen. Not in my life. You might have the odd kid who had hay fever. When I went to university to study food science and public health, food allergens weren't mentioned at all. This was in the 80s, not on the syllabus. No one talked about it. All that time, 10 years, I was a regulator. Not once in 10 years did food allergens come up as a complaint or an issue or something we had to deal with. Completely not. Even when I joined M&S, one of the top technical teams in the country at the time, food allergens wasn't there as a policy or a practice. It was just not registering. And in fact, we had one case where somebody said a Chinese meal had made the meal. And what we found is that somebody had added peanuts to the meal. It wasn't labeled because it didn't have to be then. And the person had reacted to the peanuts. There'd been a change in recipe, but it wasn't seen as a big thing in those days. And it wasn't until perhaps round about 2000 I ended up at Tesco and Hazel Gowland turned up, who's a great thought leader in this field at Tesco, and said to us, do you know about food allergens? Do you know what you should be doing? And where do we stand here today? Probably food allergens is probably the biggest challenge that we have on food safety. It dominates every business, whether you're in the food industry or whether you're in hospitality, whether you're in regulatory. It is essential that you get this right. I mean, globally, figures of over 220 million people live with food allergens. And I'm going to say food allergens rather than food sensitivity just for shorthand, but it can be both. So it shows you it's a global issue. In the UK, some 2.5 million people are thought to have some type of food allergy or food sensitivity. And every year in the UK, about 5,000 people are admitted to hospital with something related to an allergen. So it just shows you that over a period of 45 years, it's gone from something that is not in the national psyche, it's not in the food sector psyche, to something now which we all know, everyone on this call knows, is so important. And the consequences of getting it wrong are terrible. We've seen a number of deaths, which I'll go through. And also we've seen a number of huge recalls. So it's a significant factor. It's a threat to public health and a threat to a business's continuity, I think, and brand, if you want to be clinical about it. So it's something that should be treated very, very seriously. Look, and traditionally, now when I've talked about allergens, it's about a hazard-based approach. It's about food safety management systems. It's about the application of, HACCP, Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. And it's been very, very technically focused, very transactional. And I think I'm coming to the opinion that that is literally only half the story. Next slide, please. And so I'm going to be talking to you about culture, which is becoming a popular subject in food safety generally. It's emerged in the last 10 years. I gave my first talk on food safety culture to some scientists 10 years ago at the IFST, and people didn't have a clue what I was speaking about, and I could see people murmuring in the audience. And I had to stop and say, look, I can see people talking. Do you have a question? And someone said, what's this got to do with microbiology? Because they all happen to be microbiologists. They saw the word culture and they thought I was going to be talking about something that's on a Petri dish. It was totally alien to them. Is why would a food scientist be talking about people? Next slide. So if you have heard me speak in the past, you know I'm a great enthusiast about science. I believe in evidence base. So when I talk about allergens, I talk about their structure, how they work. What are the ways that we can almost medicate our way out of the allergen situation? There's some exciting work going on there about vaccines and how we can control allergens. So science, not doing that today. And the next slide. Or I talk about regulation, which obviously is a very critical matter for food businesses. How do we label? How do we control? What practices do we have to reduce the risk, to remove the hazard as possible? So a lot of time talking about the regulation, but I won't be doing that today either. Next slide. And we could talk about the equipment. What equipment do we use to detect allergens? And they're becoming far more sophisticated, cheaper to use, quicker to use. But I won't be speaking about that today either. Next slide. So I'm going to be talking about culture, which is very new to us. And I don't claim to be an expert in this field, but it seems to me that culture is increasingly cited in reports and papers relating to food allergen incidents. So you see these incidents and you see them in the press, you see them being reported. We look at coroner's reports where there's been an unfortunate death, and we can see really detailed probing into the root cause analysis. We can see in prosecutions, we can see an increasing proportion of food recalls that are related to allergen management. And what people are looking at is, well, why are these things going wrong when we have risk control systems and we have trained staff? And I think now it's dawning on a lot of us. It's the culture that is within organizations that really doesn't just underpin management of allergens, but drives it. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I think, and it's my proposition, that it is being identified as a significant emerging risk factor. And we're becoming more and more aware of the importance not just of the culture, but of how behavioral science could be used as a tool to deliver what we all want, which is safe food, especially for people that are affected with allergens. You can put your questions in the chat, and as I say, hopefully I'll have 40 minutes at the end to answer your questions, and some of you might disagree with what I'm saying. As I say, it's a newly formed idea and I'm writing a paper on it at the moment. Next slide, please. So I am open to criticism. So I'm going to talk about behavioral science and food allergens. Cute kid. Well, I hope you think it's a cute kid. Hopefully, if I say put your hands up if you think the kid is cute, I'm sure a lot of you will. It's one of my grandsons. And why do I put his picture up there? Because I'm trying to engage with you. Yeah, look, I'm an old guy. I've probably past my best, my use by date. And you might listen to me, but immediately you start involving kids in a conversation about food safety, vulnerable groups. Hey, when I'm really old, perhaps I'll put a picture up of myself then. It's because you're making a relationship. It's part of human behavior. I'm using this to almost manipulate you to get you on board, to tell you how important it is. And obviously, when I do a lot of food safety messages, I used to put pictures of my grandkids around the place, like be careful of food allergen management for teams in the factory. And I'll stick a picture of my grandkids up. My kids and grandkids eat our products. And so it's a very good way of connecting. And the landscape of food safety has gone through a massive seismic shift. And everyone now realizes that behavioral science is playing a critical part in your food safety management system. It's part of your toolbox. And so it's important to realize how can you use it properly to get what you want? How can you get those behavioral changes, which are so important? Next slide, please. And so how do you deliver an allergen safety culture? How do you deliver a behavioral system that's driving your allergen management rather than just relying on the traditional tool blocks that we have, which would include HACCP and prerequisite programs? And I think the number one objective for a food safety professional is to create a food safety culture. And you need to inoculate allergen safety culture into the business. So you've got to make it part of the business, the part of the way that the business thinks about allergens, the part that everyone has in changing their behavior to protect people. And it's probably taken me 45 years to realize that simply unsafe behavior makes unsafe food. And the more I look at this, I can see that its behavior is the thing that really drives unsafe food. And I'll go through some of the terrible deaths that we've had recently and how you can see it's the behavior both of the person that has the allergen and how they've gone into a hospitality area and the staff are in the hospitality area themselves, why it's their behavior that's created tragic incidents. Next slide, please. So, what is food safety culture? Well, people are talking it now, and it's the shared values, beliefs, and norms that affect the mindset and behavior towards food safety across a whole organization. That's quite a technical way of putting it, but when somebody says, um, what's your food safety culture? I say, look, it's just the way we do things around here. And that is so important for allergens is that, allergen, I think, is a prime part of this is, do you have an allergen focused food safety culture? Is it driving people's behavior? Um, and might go into business and say, do you do allergen behavioral driven food safety? Do you have an allergen safety culture? And a lot of people will turn to you and say, well, actually, no, we don't. But I guarantee you, every food business in this country has an allergen culture, whether they recognize it or whether they don't, whether it's a good one or whether it's a bad one. We all have it in our day to day lives as we go around a business, including regulators. What importance do they put allergen management in their scheme? Because it's not on the FHR scheme, the great scoring scheme in residence for restaurants, etc. You don't find allergen management specifically there as a score. So you could argue, is it really embedded in the culture when people do what they're measured on? And if you're not measured on that specifically, will they do it? So you can see how culture it can be affected by the norms that exist within your business. Next slide, please. And as I say, look, this is going to be really familiar to you. Listen, we all use a toolbox. I presume we're all using HACCP. We all do audits. We have a prerequisite program. So HACCP focuses on the critical parts, but we still need a very important prerequisite program. In your kitchen, do you have pest control? Do you have good hygiene? Do you have segregation? Do you train your staff? So those things, that prerequisite program is so important to support your critical control points. Well, we have in-process controls, we do root cause analysis. And so I'm not saying to you, get that and throw it out the window. It works. Demonstrably, it works. When it fails, you have problems. What I'm saying to you, next slide, please, is that what you need to do is an overlap of behavioral science. Now, look, I don't claim to be a behavioral scientist, although I work in that field. So I'm going to use some what will be technical terms that will be familiar to a social scientist, a behavioral scientist. And what I'm going to try to do is simplify them for us and translate them from psychological kind of terminology into plain English. So this is what you see when you look at food safety management systems. I've seen over 45 years, and I used to get involved in a lot of problems, whether they were allergen incidents or food safety incidents. And these were the common behavioral failures I used to see on a regular basis. So the first thing was optimistic bias. When I used to go around somebody and they've had a big incident, and it can be an allergen incident often, and they most often say to me, "Oh, I didn't think it would happen to me." There's this optimistic bias we've got that you read stuff in the news, but that's happening to other people. So it's overcoming that optimistic bias within your organization. It could happen to you. The next slide, please. And here's an example. I was at Coca-Cola for a while, and they used to go around Europe telling people about quality and safety and fire safety and health and safety in the environment. And I always thought, that couldn't happen to me. Yeah, this is my office in Hammersmith. I came back one week and the whole thing had started to burn to the ground and they closed Hammersmith Broadway. So it's like a big wake up call. I always thought it happened to someone else, not me. Next slide, please. You have illusion of control. Look, nothing's gone wrong. I've been doing this for 20 years. And so I must know what I'm doing. I must be doing the right thing. I must be in control because something has not gone wrong. So that's dangerous. Next slide, please. Cognitive dissonance. I'm doing wrong, but there's a really good reason for not doing it. And you see that sometimes on reports on allergens. People are being really thoroughly trained and educated, and they haven't followed a procedure. And they will always come up with something. Well, I didn't have time. The queue of customers was very long. If you're in manufacturing, no, the engineer needed something, so I couldn't do this. I had to. So there is that cognitive dissonance in your mind. You say, look, I know this is wrong, but I'm still going to do it because something else is more important. The next slide, please. Hopefully, some of this is resonating with you. And with allergens, not everybody is committed to allergens. You know, if you people I know that suffer from allergens, food allergens, or have family members that do, or have been involved in terrible incidents. You know, like I had a friend that worked in Pret a Manger and was very badly affected by Natasha's death and the incident there. And they're very sensitive, but not everybody is. And you get this attitudinal ambivalence. Look, they're just more important things to deal with. So in that mind, as I said, if you'd have gone back 45 years ago and tried to say food allergens are important, most people would be thinking, no, no, something more important to deal with. And I am going over to Jamaica soon, and I was there last year at a conference. And again, when you look at where they are as a country, to them they keep saying to me, look, there are far more important matters to deal with than food allergens. It's not really an issue for us. These other things are more important. So you have to overcome this attitudinal ambivalence, which is really difficult. Unless you have an allergen or been affected by it personally, it's very easy to slip into that behavioral pattern. Another slide, please. The Dunning-Kruger effect, which I sometimes suffer from myself. And it's a type of cognitive bias, I think is the best way of people. With people who have little experience or ability, assume they really know what they're talking about. And that is really dangerous. And this overestimation occurs as a result of the fact that they just don't know enough knowledge to know they don't have enough knowledge. And you see a lot of people operating in this field that simply don't have the knowledge because they see it as a great commercial opportunity or they want to do well. And a classic example might be 3 years ago, two people left the police force, a husband and wife, and wanted to set up a dairy-free product. They saw a commercial opportunity, but really didn't know. I mean, I'm sure they're excellent policemen, but not food technologists, and had gone to a supplier and developed a product. But they hadn't gone into enough depth with the supplier to realize that one of the raw materials contained milk. So they designed a product which had milk in it at low levels, but they didn't realize it because they thought they knew what they were doing, and unfortunately, somebody died. And milk, as you know, is the most popular, if I could put it that way, allergen, and it has a terrible effect on people. So that shows you sometimes we work in a sector where a little bit of knowledge is a bad thing. People overestimate what they're doing. This is a complicated subject. You do need professionals involved. And that's the first piece of advice if someone phones me up and says, I'm thinking about setting up a business. What about allergens? The first thing I say is make sure you get an expert, someone that knows what they're doing. A very dangerous effect at the moment for us. And I'm seeing it a lot in the allergen sphere, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Next slide, please. I'm sure some of you have come across it as well. People say crazy things. Behavior, I'm going to touch on criminality. I'm going to be talking generally about good people who are doing bad things, not bad people who are doing bad things. And most people I know are trying to do the right thing, but we have the criminal fraternity. That's a behavioral thing. We have food fraud. We saw last year one of our country's biggest recalls because somebody had put peanuts into mustard as a way of bulking it out and making money. Little did they think that when this product left India and the Far East and came here, they hadn't have thought that by putting peanuts in would be a food safety risk and that they would injure people. And we had a huge, massive recall of lots of products. And we also had an incident 4 years ago. There was an Indian restaurant, which again, to save money, instead of putting almonds into their product, they put peanuts in, which are a lot cheaper. And somebody went in and said, look, I'm allergic to peanuts, but I can eat almonds. Do you use peanuts? And they said, no. In fact, trading standards have picked them up on a couple of occasions before. The chap took the takeaway meal home and died instantly. Not because either of those organizations were trying to kill people, but in their behavior, it was criminal behavior. They weren't trying to do the right thing, or they didn't have that knowledge. I'm sure if that Indian restaurant had known they would kill someone, they wouldn't have taken that step. So we do have criminal behaviour to take into account. Next slide, please. And a lot of this is about leading from the front. So I'm sure many of you can identify the lady in this picture. I was speaking to people in Holland yesterday, and they all knew who she was. Remarkably, she's Princess Anne. I think she's third in line or fourth in line to the crown. And here she is visiting a food factory, but doesn't want her or her entourage to wear hairnets. So, what message is that sending out to the people in the food factory that there's their MD with Princess Anne and he's not asking her to wear a hairnet, even though they have to? And what I'm saying is allergen behavior starts from the top. If you're not going to demonstrate good allergen practice, then why should your teams? Next slide, please. And there are 5 critical dimensions that are for if you're looking at allergen safety culture. Look, I'm doing a conference for Leisure, I think at 29th of May in conference and in Warwick. And I'll go into this in a lot greater detail, but we haven't got time to that other than for me to give you just the flavour and the headlines to see, does that resonate with you or is it rubbish? So you need a really clear vision and mission of allergens that is communicated. And I think that's one of the critical control points, if you were, for allergen management is communication. You've got to change people's behavior. You've got to be consistent. You can't be doing good, effective allergen management one day and not the next. You've got to be adaptable to accept what's going on. And you've got to understand the hazards and risks. So there's a whole half hour just talking about each of those. But to give you a flavour. Next slide, please. And then, I imagine a lot of us are very familiar with HACCP. Developed in the 60s by NASA, a great food safety management system, identifying hazards and risks and working out how to control them. It's been adapted, as we've seen, to TASAP and VASAP, so it's been adapted to food fraud and people who might have bad intentions. In fact, a friend of mine got an OBE because he adapted it for public events. So it's a food safety management system, but can be adapted. And I'm saying to you, you can adapt it for allergen management in hospitality and food manufacturing. So let me give you an example. So when I've done some analysis, and I'll be sharing it at the conference, some of the HACCPs and CCPs I've come up with, one of the big one for hospitality for me is that first contact between the consumer and the weight of the person that's taken order. So I call that a critical control point for my allergen management, because that is the chance for the information to exchange, for the person to ask, do you suffer from an allergen? And for the other person to say yes, and then have a discussion to communicate. That's the most important point for me. And I did have some reservations over Natasha's law because I thought, well, if it in some ways stops that conversation, then it could weaken the system, but that we haven't seen that come through. So that would be a CCP for me. Communication. You still need a prerequisite program. You still need to clean properly. You still need to segregate. You still need to look after raw materials. You still need those things, but this is a CCP. And in food manufacturing, I found our problem in a snack factory was putting the right product in the wrong package, or the wrong product in the right package, and then under declaring an allergen, and we have an issue. So when I was doing my allergen management system, giving it the focus I thought it needed, then I put that in as a CCP. And as I say, we could talk about this for on its own. Is it applicable, and what would you say are the top CCPs? I'd be interested in your views. Next slide, please. Hand washing is very important. Cross contamination or cross contact, as people say. So you've got to get some of the basics in right. Next slide, please. And what we know is that education is necessary. Training is necessary. But what I'm looking for is behavioral ingrained changes. And you can use nudge theory to do this, where you actually don't have to train someone at all. You can change the environment they work in and it will get them to do the right thing without any training. And I've developed some nudge theory for allergen management, where hopefully it'll get people to do the right thing without having to even train them. I'm not saying don't train, I'm just saying recognize that it's worth and what you need to do. Next slide, please. And so here I am. I couldn't. I was standing by a wash hand basin, important for allergen management. You've got to make sure you're not someone is cross-contaminating from one allergen product to a non-allergen product. I was a stickler for hand washing. It always told me about the behaviour of an organisation. I stood there. You can't see me, but I'm approaching 6'7". As you can see, I'm a big, ugly guy. And when I'm just thinking, my face, people say I just seem to be angry. Well, I'm not. If I stood at the end of that wash hand base when the people are coming in, how many people do you think, what percentage wash their hands? So I'm a director of the company, 100%. And so I'm thinking, well, my education's good. I really know about training. I've cracked this. But then I hid behind one of the vats and watched what was going on. Surprise, surprise, maybe only 20% of people wash their hands. And when I stopped people, they all came out with the same things. Well, I've got something more important to do. I know it's important, but and came out with all those behavioural reasons why they weren't. They all trained. They all knew they had to do it, but the behaviour was working against them. Next slide, please. So something to consider. I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to race through this. This is a fly on a urinal. One of the big headaches I had was in men's toilets as men urinating on the floor. I used to threaten them. I used to everything I could. They wouldn't listen to me. Cleaners said, that's it. We only do the female toilets. You can do the men's toilets. And used nudge theory, where you painted little targets and flies on the urinals and cured the problem overnight. The men were aiming at the flies, aiming at the targets. You didn't have to say to them, it's unhygienic to urinate all over the floor. You cured the problem very simply with a nudge. Next slide, please. And this has been used in road safety. There's a zebra crossing. You'd slow down if you saw that coming around the corner. Next slide, please. And it's really just a painting. It's an optical illusion. So you can use these things to change people's behaviors. Unsurprisingly, people slow down when they come to the zebra. Next slide, please. And just a comment on the world. So the world has a different culture to allergen management. I think we're ahead of the game in the UK and parts of Europe. As I say, I've been to America, I've been to Holland, and you don't get this, do you suffer from any allergens, which is always a warning sign for me. I also thinks it shows you have a good food safety system. That's an obvious way of seeing it without inspecting a kitchen. And I'm going over to Jamaica, and people keep telling me it's pointless talking about allergens. But the Jamaican economy is based upon hospitality and tourism. So if the people in that country do not have it as part of their culture, certainly their guests will, and they'll be expecting a certain amount of allergen management control. That question, do you have any allergens? And so some of the work I'm doing there is, because of their tourist industry, have people coming in who will have allergens and who have an expectation. And Jamaica does as well, and we're doing some work about raising that profile. But it's really interesting. Different people from different countries have a different allergen culture. I have a Chinese family in deepest China. I visit them regularly. Allergens just isn't on the radar. It's like going back to the 70s and 80s. They wonder what I'm talking about. Next slide, please. So I'm coming to the final. So look, if you want to deliver an allergen safety management system and then deliver a culture, it has to come from the top. Yeah, the head of an organization must lead the values and show how important it is. You need to build employees' confidence that they're competent. And you've got to have managements who have the right commitment. Next slide. And there's a lot of other things that I'll talk about at this conference that's coming up. But to me, allergen system is what happens when you're not there. So, and I've been saying this, I know I haven't changed for 45 years. There's one thing when management and supervisor are in a kitchen or in a factory, when they go away and it's a night shift and it's just the staff working, the culture will click in then. If they don't have a culture and they don't think it's important, then they will revert to type. So It's very important that you embed this into an organization. Next slide, please. Beware of training. Training on its own gives a false illusion. You can educate people and know what they're doing. You can train people by showing them what to do, but you've got to change their behavior. If they don't change their behavior, you're wasting your time. That's where behavioral science comes in. Next slide, please. Just before I sign off, I think I've got 5 minutes. I did want to mention some cases. So I've been flicking through, depressingly, the number of people who have died from food allergens. It is depressing. Something that strikes me, I was going to put a few cases up, is how many of those people are so young. I've got Mara Shea, who was 12, Chloe Gilbert, who was 15, Hannah Jacobs, who was 13. A lot of these cases are young people. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that is behavior. It's about your peer group. Do you want to carry an EpiPen? Like the Chloe Gilbert, who died in my home city of Bath, went in for a kebab. Didn't know there was milk in the kebab. I didn't have maybe as a young person, she had her school friends with her to say, excuse me, I've got a milk allergy. You can imagine everyone turning around and laughing at her. You don't get milk in a kebab. Who knew you did? And she died instantly. She took one step out of that takeaway and died. And we've seen it with other people who have died. Hannah Jacobs, 13, who died at Acosta because the person was told, look, I've got a milk allergy, that really I need soy milk. But the person wasn't really trained enough. Acosta had a great system. In fact, in some ways, the coroner's report said it was a tick box system. Definitely the person had been trained, but actually had their behavior trained. I don't think it did, or they wouldn't have done what they'd done. Immediately someone says, I've got a problem, it should trigger in somebody's mind. And that's another tool that I've got about how do you make someone do the right thing then when you know there's a problem. So I won't go into all those cases. I tell you, it is so depressing, the number I've come across. And it must be horrible for not just for families, but for the hospitality and manufacturing units who are involved at all. And we know behaviour is important if you suffer from a food allergen. We've had cases of people not carrying an EpiPen, which you think, would be critical if all the big NGOs say, make sure you carry an EpiPen, and still people don't. We had a highly educated Cambridge student who knew he had an allergy. He knew the allergy was in the product, and still ate it. And you were worrying, well, what behaviour was going on in that young man's brain? Why did he take that risk? And there might be lots of reasons why psychologists say maybe we wanted to take a risk. It might have been what's going on in his life. But all of these things, I think, have behaviour at their roots. And so as I conclude, because I'm sure Eleanor is going to appear on the screen now, if you want any questions, I'll answer them now, or if you've got something you might be a bit embarrassed about, and I say there are no embarrassing questions. The questions I can't ask are often the really easy ones. I have got a LinkedIn group, and there's a community there that shares this information. Please follow that group, and you'll get some information. And you can DM me if you've got a really bad problem. And there's lots of other organisations. I'm the past president of the IFST that's got some great work on that. I'm a trustee of the CIH, also got some terrific work. So there are loads of great sources of information. Allergen UK, lots of terrific NGOs doing this type of work. So as I come to the end of my best before date, perhaps, on my presentation, I will try to my best to take any questions from you. But I will be writing a paper on this. I think Eleanor wants me to do a white paper as well. And there is
Yes.
this conference that's coming up in Warwick on the 29th of May, run by Lilja, which have got great speakers, and they've asked me to specifically go through these nudges that you can use that people will do the right thing for allergens without even knowing they're doing the right things, or just do it. Eleanor, I come to the end.
Thank you so much, Sterling. It was really impressive data, impressive cases. And guys, I don't see your hearts, claps. Please give as much appreciation as you can, as you want to our speaker. Yeah, here we go. Here we go.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Amazing. Um, before I go to our questions from guests, I do have my own question.
Of course.
You mentioned, Sterling, really one of the most heartbreaking cases with these peanuts, which were not mentioned,
Yeah.
and with the fatal outcome, of course.
Mm.
Do you think customers and consumers in general are informed enough about allergens, digitally, verbally, in general?
I think there's been a huge step change, and anyone that's worked in this field would say, well, look, in the last 5 years, it's really, we've seen the introduction of regulation. That's only quite recent. Um, so I think there has been a huge step change in the UK, but not necessarily elsewhere. Australia, we've seen it.
Yeah,
I think we're becoming more and more aware. As I say, when I was younger, I didn't know what the word allergen meant. And when I was at university studying food safety, no one said allergens to me. So it is definitely, it's in syllabuses, regulators are sensitive to it. Certainly, if you're in a hospitality sector, you see these cases of people being killed. And I'm sure most people have said, there but for the grace of God, that could have been me.
yeah,
And in manufacturing, you see the number of recalls now. Most recalls are to do with allergen, either mislabeling or the fact that something's been put in there and it shouldn't be there. And so, I mean, it is dominating food sector because they know no one wants to kill someone. They're all really good people trying to do good things. And they can see how it's business critical. You get it wrong and you go under. There was a case in Belfast recently where the person didn't die, but they were prosecuted, the company, and I think they're going out of business. And that's not unusual.
yeah, definitely. And there is another question coming from our attendee. Thank you, Sterling, for your presentation. And do you know of any research into why there is the change over the last 45 years from not on the radar to this is the high risk and must be mitigated?
Wow, what a excellent question that is, and quite a difficult one to answer. I there is a theory that we're becoming more sensitive to the food that we eat. So has something changed in our diets? Because in fact there are 68 allergens, and different parts of the world have different allergens. So has something changed in our diets? There's a hygiene theory which says we're becoming cleaner, we're not exposing children to so many types of food. So is our immune system strong enough? And you hear that now, people think peanuts, even if you haven't got a peanut allergy, think, oh, peanuts must be unsafe, despite the fact everyone can eat them except those affected. And then people stop feeding their kids peanuts, where as they should. They should be exposing people this so that you have a healthy immune system. So I think a lot of it is down to diet and what we feed and where you live. And so it's becoming more on the radar because, 5,000 people went to hospital last year. I bet when I was a kid, I would wonder if you could count them on the fingers of your hand. And if you look at the newspapers, up until the 2000 and 2010, it wasn't on the radar of the media. Was now, once a week, someone somewhere is being prosecuted, or they have killed somebody or injured someone. So it's a very good question. There's a lot of combination. I don't think there's one silver bullet. This is the answer. But she's absolutely right to say it has increased, and that could be a reason for why it's increased and why we're more sensitive.
Yeah, and it's actually a very interesting topic because before we touched mainly recalls here at our academy, and it's the first time when we touch allergies,
Mm.
allergens in general. And maybe you can give us more insights what steps are taken by companies, by corporates when customer disclose a food allergy.
Yeah, so it's a problem for corporates. So when I was working in a factory at 3,000 people, that's a problem. But it's equally a problem for a small hospitality that might only employ 3 people. And in
Mhm.
fact, a lot of the deaths you see are small shops. They might be part of a bigger chain, but small groups of people. And the only way I could say for those people to deal with it is number one, know what you're doing. And people assume, oh, I know a bit about this. And there's so many people out there offering advice that I wonder when you look at their credentials, what they're basing that advice on. So I would get a trusted source, and there are NGOs you can trust. There are organisations like the IFST that produce lots of information. But if you want to take it seriously, I think you need to get somebody that understands what's going on, who will be able to look at your whole food safety system and assess the allergen risk within that, and will have come with some ready-made solutions. Yeah, so if you said to me, I've got a small restaurant, come down and look at it, I would say to you, look, I think here are the risks, and look, here are some solutions if you want to change people's behavior. Or, physically you need to segregate this from this, or this is a bad product with cross contact, or you're not labeling it properly, people aren't making a formed choice. So I think the easy thing is, get an assessment of your business, get someone to help you with that, get a plan, get a journey, and start with some of the simple, easy things first that you can do, which is, educating, training, and making sure you're changing the behavior of your staff.
Yeah, definitely. And it's all about food safety culture as well, right?
Absolutely. But this is specifically, I think allergens over the years have been almost like a transactional science, regulatory driven. Whenever I talk about this, I'm normally talking about the legislation, I'm normally talking about labeling, I'm normally going into the protein itself and the different types of protein and how they elicit reactions. That's the stuff I get off on. I love that. But actually, what we don't do, or I haven't done, is talk enough about, well, how do you get this into practice? I think because most people in a kitchen or factory will say, well, give me the practical things I should do. I don't want to go to university and know about an allergen. I just want you to tell me what easy tools can I do that will work.
That's the topic of our white paper, the one we mentioned.
Yeah. Do something.
Yeah, and we have another question. Do you think the behavior audits in the workplace and food businesses could be an effective tool? Such audits worked well during COVID in reducing outbreaks, but in terms of allergies.
That's a fantastic question. It's interesting that the person mentioned COVID, because a lot of this behavioral science and nudge theory came into its own in COVID. How do you stop people doing things? And that was all nudge. You couldn't educate people. So that is a good reason to mention COVID. And sorry, my mind's going. What's the first part of the question, Ella? So one bit was COVID, and the other bit was
Yeah, the other bit was like about behavior audits in the workplace and food
that's,
business. Could it be an effective tool?
that is a very good question, because you can do behavioural audits, different for different people. A lot of the things you do will be familiar to the people online. So if I'd say, well, one of the things you can do if you're a bigger organisation is the employee survey, and most people do that once a year. And you could drop it into there, because the very fact it's in there, people think, oh, I wonder why allergens in there, and you can get feedback. So that's something that a lot of people practice anyway, and it's about using existing tools but in a different slant. He's quite right, or she's quite right, to mention audits are such a powerful tool. So people say to me, can you turn up to my factory or restaurant? I was at a restaurant recently. Just walk around and tell me what, because you have FHRS. And that gives you some clue if you're a restaurant. But so you tell me what you think, because that is normally about things going wrong. But what people really want is, I don't want someone to come up and tell me that's wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong. I want someone to tell me, well, what do I do? I've yet to come across a person in the food sector who doesn't want to do the right thing. There might be reasons they don't, but I've never met that person who says I don't care, and I've never met that person. I'm sure there are people there I want to do wrong, and most people just want to have an audit, as you say. Well, whatever you want to call it, an inspection, an audit, a sense check. I normally call them sense checks or position checks. And a lot of people say to me, "Well, I'm quite comfortable here, but can you talk to me about allergens?" And so I might walk around the factory, and there's certain questions I ask that will kind of give me a clue about what people's attitudes there are to allergens. So there are a number of tools that you would use now, but you just put a different slant on it. And a shout out for Camden BRI, who have a tool. So you can go to Camden and they will produce a tool for you and say, look, here's a toolkit. And I have a toolkit as well, a really simple, basic one that will get you 90% there with only doing a small amount of work. I think that's what you want to do. A lot of people want to Get 90% there before they worry about being 100% perfect. Get 90% there and put simple things in that are easy to do, cheap to do, ineffective. They don't cost a lot of money. And then you can, that, but will change behavior.
Thank you so much. There is another question. Is the terminology of CCPS, probably critical control points, consistent with more recent risk-based approaches, for example, QRA? Do we need new decision flowcharts for this for deciding an allergen critical control points? If so, of course.
It's a very, very, very good question. It's fundamental to my thinking, to be honest with you. Look, so these are my thoughts. These are my opinions. I don't claim to be a behavioral scientist. I have worked in public health and food safety for a number of years globally. And I think it can be because HACCP is a food safety system. But some people use it for quality management. You could argue, is that good or not? And as I say, it's FASAP and TASAP, which is basically the same system, but has been just adapted in a certain way. And I have an allergen critical control point system, which I'm writing on now, and I'm just trying to explain it to people and to listen to people because it's only my own theory. And there might be somebody out there that thinks, well, that's complete rot and it's waste. It's not appropriate for this, and but I think if you're not careful, allergen management gets put in with all food safety, and I don't think it gets the prominence it deserves. And in my way, it is a separate, standalone food safety risk that presents its own challenges, and they present a completely um, additional risk than just normal HACCP. Normal HACCP, if you try to put it into a very large kitchen or restaurant, wouldn't identify the point of how important communication is. It wouldn't focus on that. Whereas I'm saying if you can get that right, you're almost there. When I was on a plane recently going to Dublin, someone got on the plane and someone just simply said, "My kid's got a peanut allergy." So the people on Ryanair just said, "We're not serving peanuts today. If you've got peanuts, don't eat them." So there are kind of really simple things that you could do. Those Ryanair people have obviously been trained with a statement. Be brave.
Yeah, actually, especially when you're flying somewhere, there is not so broad selection of food, and majority of these items are quite dangerous,
So
unfortunately.
an airline asked me, well, how would you do it? What questions would you have? What phrases? Who says what over the tunnel? And I say, look, I'm going to Dublin. I can live without peanuts for an hour.
Yeah,
You could just get an alternative snack that didn't have allergens, and you've removed the hazard. And some of it is about don't try to manage it, for God's sake. If it's not critical to your business, if you make peanuts for a living, then you have to do it. But on an aeroplane, if you don't have peanuts, but you have another snack that doesn't have allergens in, and you have
yeah,
more allergen-free um, recipes if you're in manufacturing. I just took a load of allergens out that weren't necessary when I was in a factory, and then I didn't have to manage so much. And the public didn't know. Didn't
yeah.
cost me less, didn't cost me more. So there's simple things you can do to remove allergens in restaurants as well. I know some restaurants don't have any of the 14 allergens in, but even if you serve allergens, which is not unreasonable, I love milk, and there are things you can do to reduce the type of products that might contain that allergen and make your life a lot easier and your customers' life.
Yeah, and what about cross contact between allergens and allergenic products? Are there any specific procedure to prevent this cross
Yeah,
contact?
absolutely. So you might say there are critical control points, but this prerequisite program I'm talking about, the general good things you should do, good practices. Absolutely, if you looked in allergens, you'd find cross contact there. And there are things you can do about how do you avoid it with raw materials, how do you avoid it on benches, how do you avoid it on people's hands. Often someone might handle something like peanuts as an extreme example, and then go and handle a tiramisu afterwards, and don't clean their hands. And what they've effectively done is just taken an allergen across. And that's not unusual. You should absolutely avoid cross contact because the problem is very low levels of allergens can spark a big reaction. So you
Mhm.
don't need mass contamination. I'll get a handful of peanuts and throw it in the product. It can be at very, very low levels. Um, Yeah, so cross contact. Some people say cross contamination. I don't like contamination because peanuts, I love peanuts, they're a healthy food. You can't contaminate something that is so delicious, but it is cross contact, and you want to avoid that for certain people in the population.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sterling. And my request would be maybe we can somehow summarize our session today to those who heard about this topic the first time, because probably it's something that we just started to discuss more and more and more to make people more aware on such problem and to make sure that people can be safe and secured from possible disease.
This is, as I say, I've been doing it for 45 years. This is the first time that I put these different threads together and kind of woven them together and say, maybe this is an idea. So I'm looking to publish some papers. I'm doing a conference. And I'm still at that point where I'm really shouting out to the community and saying, look, if you have a view, I'd be really interested to hear it. If you think I'm wrong, if you think I should be doing this or that, I'm trying to listen to people and see what they say. So if I haven't answered your question, you've got a question. Put all your questions in here, and I'll do my very best with Eleanor to publish what I think the answers are. And as I say, you can join me on LinkedIn, and there's a whole load of people racking their brains about how you can solve some problems. It's a very problem fixing page. It's my personal page, Sterling Crew. There is no other Sterling Crew, unfortunately. Well, there's one.
Only one.
Yes, the those of you old enough will know the keyboard of Santana is called Sterling Crew. In fact, his name's Mark Sterling Crew. My wife sent me a Valentine's message by email 2 years ago and sent it to him by mistake. He didn't reply. And she won't tell me what she said. One thing about having a stupid name is I'm easily found if you need to ask questions.
Thank you so much, Sterling, for being with us today. And thanks to everyone who is not on holiday this almost still Easter weekends. And I do believe that this session was useful, super interesting, and super valuable to all of you guys. To get slides, you just need to drop me a message and I will send it out to you guys today. And tomorrow, the recording will be sent out to all of you privately via email and also published on our LinkedIn. So, and I do wish everyone resourceful week, great day, and see you on our next webinar, which will be already 5th of May with Bijan Perkmalian from McDonald's, with whom we will talk about leadership in a digital age. Have a nice day to everyone. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.